Hey, learning nerds. Before we begin today's show, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Idle Courses Academy. If you're looking to transition over into the corporate instructional design space, you need the right guidance to do so. And Dr. Sargent and her team have done an incredible job of focusing on what's important to be a corporate instructional designer, like storyboarding, ID models and theories, authoring tools, project management tactics, and more. They even cover how to make your resume and portfolio stand out from the crowd and have an impressive completion rate with their students working at organizations like Google, Salesforce, GM, Uber, Walmart, and Amazon. Also, you won't be going through the learning experience alone. You'll be studying alongside other aspiring instructional designers, as well as working with experienced coaches. And as an added bonus, you'll get a copy of my book at a discount, What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer. So check out the industry-recognized program that's showing up in job descriptions as preferred training and education by going to idlecourses.com/academy. Enrollment is officially open again, so be sure to use my discount code Luke to save you $88 off your enrollment. And now, let's start the show. Hello, learning nerds, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast you're going to hear today. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I'm your host of this show. I am a senior instructional designer and program manager. I'm an author, instructor, blogger, and podcaster, and the founder of Instructional Design Institute. My passion and my purpose is instructional design, and I love to be able to share with you more experiences about instructional design in general and to help you along your own instructional design journeys. Whether you are a newbie or you're a veteran and you've been doing this for years, all are welcomed on into this show. And of course, you can find all my information over at drlukehobson.com. And before I introduce today's guest, I have an announcement. I have been working on something behind the scenes now for months, and I am finally ready to unveil it. And that is that I have completely revised and revamped Instructional Design Institute. I have taken everything I've learned about over the years and put it back over into the Institute to really make it brand new and to make sure that I'm doing the very best to possibly serve you. What does this look like now? Well, it is a 7-week long instructional design bootcamp. We are going to be covering everything from andragogy, backward design, learning strategies, universal design for learning, and evaluating your courses, your trainings, and your program's effectiveness. And of course, along the way, you are going to be building and designing your own learning experience. You're going to have a course by the end of this because, of course, I want you to have hands-on experience and be able to have an artifact by the end. So if you want to be able to incorporate that into a portfolio, and of course, I can help walk you through how to make one as well too. Well, that's all going to be included inside of there. This is going to be a cohort. It's going to be community focused to make sure that you do have that type of peer-to-peer relationship, that support system, that structure to help to guide you along the way. You're going to be getting peer feedback on your assignments, as well as too, is that as your instructor, I'm also going to be giving you feedback as well. On top of all of that, I'll be sending you a free copy of my ebook, What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer, for you to have that guide too. Now, this is definitely for more of the educational focus. That is my jam. As you know me, higher education is certainly in my blood. That is my sweet spot. Of course, for those in other different types of sectors who want to be able to take this, you certainly can, but know that I definitely focus more on the learning nerd side. I do not focus on the e-learning, the authoring tool side of a house. Just want to make sure that you are aware about that. You can find more information, go down below, and you can find the website inside of the show notes. You're also going to see an application form too, and I did that on purpose because I want to learn more about you, your goals, and your expectations, so that way I know how to help you as your instructor. So go down below, apply today. The next run starts on May 1st, so you still have plenty of time to be able to apply. I'll be in touch about everything, and I cannot wait to nerd out with you over 7 weeks. Now, with all that being said, let me introduce today's guest, Dr. Tom Tobin. Tom is a founding member of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Center for Teaching, Learning, and Mentoring. He's also a very accomplished author. He has written many books, and he is a strong advocate for the universal design for learning community. I've actually known Tom for years, this is so strange to say, but this is the first time I've actually talked to him. But I've been following his Twitter account, I've been following his LinkedIn posts, He's an extremely insightful and knowledgeable human being, also an extremely kind human being. Found that out on today's show, which is going to be something that you're going to clearly hear as we go into our conversation. But I invited Tom because I've been hearing from many of you about how you've been struggling with burnout and trying to be able to figure out what steps to take next as far as sort of transitioning. And perhaps you are already working within academia and you're trying to be able to figure out, well, what other paths and alternatives can I potentially take? Or if you're looking outside of academia, how do my academic skills apply into the corporate space or something along those lines? Well, with all of those questions, I thought who better to talk to than Tom, because him and his colleagues literally wrote a book on this very subject. So Tom, Katie Linder, and Kevin Kelly wrote a book called Going Alt Ac, a guide for alternative academic careers. This book actually came out during the pandemic, like right at the start of the pandemic. And because of that, I don't think it received as much attention as it really should have. It's an excellent book. It goes into not just how to transition, but by being able to identify your skills and where they're going to fit into different types of positions and different types of roles. And some of them you really might not be aware about. We also talked to inside of this conversation about how to be able to think more about yourself as far as with being able to do a side hustle, whether that's going to be for teaching, speaking, developing courses, whatever it is, thinking more about how you can actually make that extra form of income. We talk about that. And we also talk more about you building a brand, a portfolio, and why that is going to become so valuable. So with all of that said, this conversation is really going to help you out if you are thinking about what is your next move within your career and planning things out from next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. This book can absolutely help you. And this conversation is going to try to be able to summarize all of these different chapters and all of these different topics. So I am not going to waste any more time. Here is the one and the only Dr. Tom Tobin. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Luke, for having me on the show. Glad to talk with you today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Tom, I cannot wait to talk more about with you and for all of your work. And we're going to get into all that fantastic good stuff. But before we go any further, can you just please introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us more a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure thing. My name's Tom Tobin. I'm a founding member of the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Mentoring at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Now, beyond my day job, I'm a scholar, author, and speaker on issues of quality and technology-mediated education. Things like copyright, evaluation of teaching practice, academic integrity, accessibility, universal design for learning, basically the stuff that scares the heck out of instructors and deans.
Yeah, pretty much. And this was so crazy is that, Tom, like, as we were actually talking about this before the podcast, I have known you for forever, what feels like at least forever. And somehow we have never talked before, but I have been following you on Twitter and on LinkedIn for like the longest time. And somehow we never actually came across. But then one of the things that completely I was just like, oh my gosh, that moment did happen, is that I attended Dr. Shiwa Brazil's dissertation, and then you were there and you were speaking. And I was like, I have to talk with Tom. I have to say hi and introduce myself. So I'm so glad we're finally able to come together after all this time.
Oh, absolutely. And likewise, I've known about you and your work for a long time. You and I have moved in parallel circles. Our focus was different and diverse enough that we connected with very different groups of people. You and I do two things the same, I think. One of them is we're both at a point in our work, in our career, in our advocacy, where it's not about us anymore, and we're looking for who are the newer voices in the field that we can champion and learn from and listen to. And Dr. Shiwa Brazil in Montana was one of those voices. Was glad to work on her dissertation as an informal advisor and then come to support her work. So I love that you're a fellow silo buster.
Absolutely. And she needs to come on the show. She is a brilliant, amazing person. So
yeah,
we got to bring her on the show as well too. But putting that all aside, Tom, I'm actually curious to learn more about your journey, because I really started to know you as far as for being like the UDL expert. In my mind, that's what I always saw you talk about and do and preach about. But how did you actually get to where you are today? Because I know you've accomplished quite a bit, and it's not just only UDL. You do a whole bunch. So how did you get to where you are today?
The short version of the story is that I started my career wanting to be an English professor. My first two books are all about 19th century British literature and art history, and only about 6 people have ever read both of those books. My whole career, though, has been as a learning developer and theorist. So you can say that I've really lived out the alternative academic career path. I was one of those fortunate, crazy people who got my high school diploma, and then 4 years later, I had an undergraduate degree in literature and also a teaching certification, did my student teaching in K-12. 2 years after that, had a master's degree in literature. 4 years after that, PhD in British literature and art history. I was a 28-year-old kid who didn't really know how to do my laundry all that well, but I had a doctorate. Along the way, while I was working on my PhD, I got a job at a 2-year college in Western Pennsylvania. This was 1997. They hired me to help them create their very first online courses. Now, why would you bring a literature person in to do that? Well, I was a bibliographer, and I was learning HTML, teaching it to myself in order to do my bibliographic work and create content for it. And the internet, which was brand new-ish at the time, was a really handy tool. It went beyond just database management. So they hired me on. I helped them to adopt Blackboard version 1. You instructional design nerds, I was one of the OGs for learning management systems. I became a sysadmin. I taught myself the role as we went along. But what really changed my career path, his name was Marty. Marty was an instructor in the business division at our 2-year college. He came to me and he said, I think this online stuff is crud. I don't think it's going to be effective. I think face-to-face is the only way people can learn. But I want to have a job in 10 years, so would you teach me how to teach online? Now, Marty's honesty was refreshing. That was just the way he approached the world. What you don't know yet about Marty is that he had gone blind in his 40s due to undiagnosed and so untreated diabetes. What that meant was, and I'll put air quotes here for the listeners who aren't watching the video here, he didn't know how to, quote, be a blind person, so no touch typing, no braille, no getting around with a cane, none of that. He had been a sighted person, and then he went blind. So, I'm a new person in my field. I say, yeah, sure, I'll help you, no problem. And then I close the door, he leaves, and I think, look to the literature. The literature will save you. I do a literature search, and there is no literature. By good luck, I got connected to Norm Coombs, Coombs. He was a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology. He'd been blind since birth, and he was a nationwide advocate for the rights of instructors with disability barriers in the environment. I got connected with Norm. I explained what I wanted to do, and Norm gave me some good advice, but it was essentially good luck kid because not many people were doing faculty support for faculty whose environments didn't fit their ability profiles. Now, cut to the end of the story, right? Marty had been a sighted person, so we got him to think about the TV screen and what buttons are where in Blackboard, and he basically memorized Blackboard version 1. We got graduate students from a local university on grants to come in and be Marty's eyes and ears. So when he taught his intro business course and students would post things in a discussion forum or turn in work via a Dropbox, the students would read out, graduate students would read out what Marty's freshman learners would say. And Marty would say, oh yeah, put this feedback here and respond this way. And the graduate students would type it out. So much more effective actually than JAWS, which was just being developed at that point. And that worked splendidly for 3 semesters. Marty was a successful online instructor until I had a vice president standing in my office doorway telling me, we've got to shut Marty down. And I said, why? We actually did it. And the vice president said, do you realize we're violating FERPA privacy laws like 7 different ways here? Oh, we had to stop. So that story about Marty, though, that failure caused me to pause and think, if it was this challenging to help one person with one class, who else is out there whom we're not serving well, or maybe not serving at all? And I started to think about people with work schedules that didn't allow them to come to campus, family and caregiving needs, military service, folks who just lived far away from campus. There were all these barriers that were out there, and I thought, we can do better with the service that we're doing for folks. And, along the way, I kept learning myself. After that stint with the 2-year college, I ended up going into industry. I worked for 7 years in the learning and development arm of Blue Cross and Blue Shield, the health insurance industry. And that Blue Cross Blue Shield story was great, right? So my colleagues at Blue Cross said, "Oh, you have a PhD? That's nice. Can you do project management?" And, for those of you counting along at home, I've got the master's and PhD in English literature. I've got the master's degree in information science. I went back and got a professional project management certification because the folks at Blue Cross said you need these skills. I got a master online teacher certification, the Quality Matters reviewer certification, the professional accessibility core competencies certification, and I just completed last year the Academic Leadership Academy from Penn State. So I tell my nieces and nephews I'm in 44th grade, and I never really stopped being a learner. And I've also sat in just about every spot you can think of in higher education and in industry. So since the advent of online courses in higher ed in the late 1990s, my work has focused on using technology to extend the reach of higher education beyond our traditional audiences. I advocate for the educational rights of people with disabilities, people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and my education practice books focus on practical ways that we can address barriers for learning. So I worked with Annie Taylor from Penn State and Gene Mandernack from Grand Canyon University on evaluating online teaching, implementing best practices. That came out in 2015. We saw that there were a lot of folks who knew how to observe and assess the design of online courses. Your instructional design audience, you know this very well. We've got the Quality Matters rubric, we've got the UC Chico rubric, lots of different things. But there really wasn't any clear guidance on how to observe and assess the teaching behaviors that people exhibited when they were in traditional asynchronous online environments. So we wrote the book. And the same thing with I wrote a comic book called The Copyright Ninja, because lots of people don't understand the basics of copyright, and I don't want to turn people into miniature lawyers. So that was a lot of fun, finding the artists, and I have to credit Mark Neese, Kneece, from the Savannah College of Art and Design. He wrote a wonderful book called How to Script for Comic Books, and I devoured that in a couple of days. And the end result of the whole process was publishing a comic book, which was kind of fun. And then things like Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. When Kirsten Beeling and I wrote Reach Everyone, Teach Everyone, UDL in higher education, it was because Universal Design for Learning in the K-12 environment had a concise definition and years of data behind it. And when we were thinking about that book in 2016 and 17, it was just catching on in higher education. It's all over the place now, and I feel kind of like the Pied Piper in that regard. There's a bunch of people doing good work on UDL research right now, and we're at the point where we're starting to get those evidence-based practices. In fact, that's the next book that I'm writing is called UDL at Scale, and it's advice for presidents, provosts, boards of trustees, deans. How do you do this at an institutional level rather than an individual level? But the book that we're talking about today is Going Alt-Ac, a guide to alternative academic careers, because every single time I said, this is what I'm going to do with my life, it didn't happen that way. And those alternative choices that were available to me, I had to really seek them out and be proactive and go out and try. And, before all of that kind of stuff happened, like, for example, I had an opportunity in 2018 to go to Budapest, Hungary on a Fulbright Scholar grant and help Eötvös Loránd University there develop its first faculty development program. I gave workshops and training to 12 other colleges and universities and a couple military units in Hungary about training and learning in the field when people are away from the formal places and spaces that we've built as higher education. So a lot of that instructional design kind of focus. I've been an ID with a formal title of instructional designer once. and that all folds into the sort of knowing a lot about a lot of things and hearing good ideas from people in various fields and thinking, how can I apply that over there? How can I cross these streams? I was honored, if you the last piece of the background, I'm honored that I'm in a position to be able to listen to a lot of folks. I serve on an editorial board on Insight, a Journal of Scholarly Teaching, on the editorial board of the Online Journal of Distance Learning Administration. And that's been a fun ride. I got named to EdTech Magazine's 2020 Dean's List of Educational Technology Influencers. In 2022, I received the Wagner Award for Leadership in Distance Learning. And I just was recently named by EduFlow as one of the world's top 100 learning influencers, along with a certain Dr. Luke Hobson, who's also on that list. So congratulations to you as well.
Never heard of him. No idea. Yes, but no. That's awesome, Tom. That is awesome. And thank you for sharing all of those stories. And that's incredible. I'm going to be on the lookout, by the way, for your UDL institution level book. That's
probably a 2024 release. So fall of 24.
That's super interesting, though. I can't wait to read that. Also, do you teach a course on networking, by the way? Because from all those stories, you must be a networking wizard at this point in time of making those relationships, connecting with people, because that was a lot of what you've done.
Well, also, if you're listening to the podcast on audio, you can't see I'm pointing to all the gray hair that's on top of my head. All of this is earned, right? So what I've just described was 30 plus years of a conversation that's been happening for a very long time. So if that had happened overnight, I'd probably be asleep right now.
I understand.
So that's a long, long time. And the one thing that I tell everybody, and I'll say this to all of your guests and listeners, is I've got 20 minutes for anybody. If you're a graduate student just starting out, if you're the president of a university, if you're somebody I meet on the street, let's talk for 20 minutes. I'd love to hear your story, find out what makes you tick, what's important to you. And if there's a way that I can help you push forward on things that are meaningful for you, I'll give it my best shot. So I've got 20 minutes for anybody. So that's the very shortest possible course in networking that you can take right there.
There you go. Very generous of you. You heard Tom. He just said blow up his email. All of you just fire it up right now. But no, that's awesome, Tom. That's awesome. So let's talk about really why you're here today, because you did actually mention it about your book, Going Alt-Ac, and you wrote this with your colleagues, Katie Linder and with Kevin Kelly. And this book to me sounded so interesting because it does talk about alternative paths that someone within the academia world can actually go and pursue. And when I saw your posting about this on LinkedIn, I must have read my 29th post from other people describing burnout and frustration and been trying to be able to figure out, what do you do? Where do you go? And I know a thing or two about a thing or two because I have worked in academia for years. So I have been a lab assistant, an instructor. I've been an academic advisor, an instructor, a program manager. So I've dabbled in a few different areas, but definitely most people I don't think are as well versed about what you can actually do from different types of paths and alternatives. So before we go into this, can you tell us more about your inspiration behind why you wanted to write the book?
Yeah, this was a fun one because if you go to the academic self-help shelf in the bookstore, there's dozens of these books. It talks about how to, and with titles like Surviving the PhD Grind or What to Do When Your Field Has Dried Up. And they're kind of these, apocalyptic, getting over the emotional drain of not being able to actually follow the path that you thought you were going to follow. We wanted to write a book that was very different in tone, that was the experiences that you have in getting a postgraduate degree can serve you well. You can, while you're working on your education, set yourself up to go into a number of different kinds of paths, either in academia but not on the instructor track, or adjacent to academia, where you're using academic skills in other fields. It was weird because I was thinking in 2016 that this book needed to be written for the reasons that you've just mentioned. I was having all these individual conversations with people who said, how did you get where you are? This doesn't seem like a path that I could follow. Or I'm having challenges just mentally figuring out what is possible. Because of course, when you're a graduate student, your advisors, they're the successful ones, right? They're the ones who went through their work and they got the faculty positions. And so what they know is how to create more faculty members like them. And they are seldom connected to people in industry or adjacent fields so that they have a way to advise us as learners about what else is out there beyond becoming another tenure track person. So I wanted to write my own book. Meanwhile, Kevin Kelly is in San Francisco. He's working on the Peralta grants, and he thinks, I need to write this book because there's so many resources out there that people can use to follow alternative academic paths, but nobody knows about them. They don't get play. So he wanted to write that book. Katie Linder, meanwhile, is at Oregon State University, and she, in her role as director of their Teaching and Learning Center, she's thinking, I need to write this book. I work with so many graduate students who don't seem like they have a clear path beyond where they're going after the degree, and I've had conversations with so many people who have rich experiences to share and stories to tell, and she was going to write the book. Fast forward to 2017 at Online Learning Consortium in, was it Orlando? Yeah, Florida. We were at a Disney property, and the three of us connected. I'd known Katie for years and years. We'd been colleagues and friends, and Katie had known Kevin for a long time as well. And the three of us got together, and over dinner, the conversation was, well, what are you working on? And I said, well, I'm going to write this book on alternative academic careers. And Katie said, no, I'm going to, and Kevin, me too, right? And we realized that we were each writing three very different books. Kevin's was all about the resources that nobody knew about. Katie's was all about the people whom she could connect with, and mine was all about the theoretical way to think about those pathways. So we recognized, why don't we all combine our talents and put the book together that way? So Katie was the glue. She's the first person who said, we should do this together. And she became lead author and, head sled dog as we were all pulling in the same direction. And it was a wonderful writing experience because I had met Katie in person a few times, but I'd only met Kevin the once. And we wrote the whole thing over the course of 2017 remotely, with everybody sort of dividing things up. And as you've read the book, Luke, you notice that the chapters, we strove to have a consistent tone. So you couldn't tell which one of us had written which chapters, but we totally did, right? And so some of those chapters are quote unquote mine, some are Katie's, some are Kevin's. But it was a fun way to get that information out there. And I'll also confess, it was also really bad timing that the book got published from Stylus Press. The announcements went out at the end of January 2020. And then 5 weeks later, there was a pandemic. So in terms of, people coming to the book, I'm grateful that you have picked it up now, and I'm hopeful that it gets a little bit more play, because we really do want people to pick it up and say, here's a manual for how I can think this process through. So yeah, thanks for talking about the inspiration. We all saw a different need and they all keystoned together.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because of, obviously, timing of the book, not that great, as we're all trying to figure out how do we go about with our new world. So, that's not the best timing. However, now we're still in this type of interesting world. It is not the same. Clearly, we still are in these different types of exploratory paths for things. And even in 2023, I am still having conversations with people about frustration, confusion. I actually just talked to the PhD student this week who was thinking about it, where she's just like, So what's next? I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to actually go into this field, but I've done all of these things already. What do I actually do? So it's super relevant, even with today's day and age. And my question for you now, from hearing all of those things, is how do you know that it's actually time to do this as far as you're looking for a different type of a path? Because for some people, it seems like they reach a breaking point, and then it's like the all or nothing of just like, I'm quitting my job today. I can't take this anymore. And just like kind of, goodbye. So is there a usual type of a sign, a feeling, a trigger, something for us to be able to recognize before it gets too late that we should really seriously take into consideration exploring going down a different path?
Yeah, burnout and feelings of being unfulfilled or uncertainty, or the sunk cost feeling of, I spent all this money and put in all this time, and now there isn't a job in my field. I went through that. So you imagine it's the year 2000, and my professors were telling me that there's going to be this wave of retirements of 19th century British literature people, and they're going to need to fill those faculty lines, right? And I was going to be the bumper crop of PhDs who had our pick of places to go and jobs to have. And readers, it didn't happen that way, right? So people retired and they didn't replace the faculty lines because things were shrinking, and budgets and economy and all kinds of other things. The hard numbers of when I got my PhD in North America, there were 425 of us with 19th century British literature specializations of some kind. So Romanticism, Victorianism, the art historians, the literature people, the historians themselves. There were, in the Chronicle and Modern Language Association job lists that year, 8 tenure line positions. And everybody who had a PhD the year before us was still in line, right? So we, of necessity, had to pivot. My partner got her PhD in 19th century British Lit. She did Dickens, I did art history, right? And we could not find jobs in our field as faculty members, as academics. And we didn't want to go through the let me teach 5 classes at 5 different institutions and just be on the road all the time. We didn't want to go down that path. So we reinvented ourselves. We recognized that we had other kinds of skills. And once you hit that burnout or that feeling of unfulfillment, that's a sign that it's already too late to start really thinking and doing in terms of alternatives for yourself. Now, if you're already at that stage, we can help, right? So we talk about that in the book as well. But don't let it get that far if you can possibly do, right? Even when you're comfortable where you are, it pays you back to be intentional about exploring what other people do and making connections to those other people. Whether you ever need to call in a favor for those folks or you can help them out isn't the point. They will serve whether you make a move or you stay put. And as long as you can be a resource for other people, it helps to just be connected and be part of that headspace.
All right. So hypothetically speaking, I am connected to the headspace, as you just said. I am recognizing that there are patterns. Things are not going so well for me. So now I have made up my mind. This is not what I want to be able to do. I need to seek a new type of alternative, and being able to actually pursue this. What types of actionable steps should I be taking in order to get this started and to do it properly and not just kind of haphazardly and just winging it? What steps should I be doing?
Here's 3.5 things in order. 1, find supportive colleagues who do work in places or ways that you don't know how to do yet. So if you're thinking about the skills that you have in instructional design, right? You've got a master's degree in organizational psych, or you've got a master's degree in ID. The colleagues whom you want to connect with are the folks who maybe do what you do, but in a different industry, right? To find the people who went to the corporate side of the house rather than the academic side of the house. For me, that was... It used to be called ASTD, the American Society for Training and Development. It's now ATD, and they keep shortening the acronym. But I went to that conference, And I recognized that there were all these people who got degrees in things and then didn't go into higher education, but did almost exactly the same thing in companies. So somebody who worked at Dow Chemical or somebody who worked at Blue Cross and Blue Shield, I ended up working at Blue Cross and Blue Shield because I had attended this conference and saw, oh, wait, these people do cool things and I have skills to do it. So finding those supportive colleagues who are in the industries and asking people, start if you're a graduate student or you're in an academic position now, start by asking your faculty colleagues, hey, where do your students get jobs? Or do you know any of our alumni who are working in fields that are different from but similar to the skill sets that we want? So step one is find those colleagues and actually talk to them about what they do. Ask for those informational interviews. Ask for 15 minutes of somebody's time over coffee or Zoom. The second one, two, is do your own skills inventory. Think about the academic things that you do. I know how to write a research paper. That turns into the skill of original research. I can write a report. I can advocate for a path of action for the company or the unit that I'm working with. I ran department meetings because nobody else would do it. Everybody else stepped backwards, right? But I ran department meetings for 3 years. I know how to coordinate teams of people. I know how to, work on the politics of an institution or an organization, and I know how to document the work that we're doing. Those are all transferable skills. And one of the things that helps when we do skills inventories is we translate from academia speak, that if you just handed somebody your resume and said, hey, I want to work with you, and they said, what is all of this, right? I don't understand this. Help translate that into language that folks in industry will understand, or folks who work in higher education but outside of departments and schools. The third piece is to think about your career planning as a self-defined path. If you're going to be a professor and you are one of the lucky people who gets that assistant professor job on the tenure line, you have a career path already laid out for you. You spend your time at assistant, you do these things, you get promoted to associate professor, then full professor, you get tenure, all of that business. That's a 30-year career right there laid out in front of you, and all the steps are clear and visible. Alternative academic careers often don't have ladders like that. So in the book, we talk about how to recognize positions that are equivalent steps. Talking about if you're at an operational level now and you want to go into supervision, the next bump up from assistant to associate professor, you're looking for an associate director position or a director position of a unit someplace. Or if you don't want to go into supervision, you're looking for a senior title at an industry position or in higher education in the staff and administration. So there's lots of different ways that you can put your career ladder together. And instead of going straight up rung to rung on that ladder, an alternative academic career path often zigzags. We often move in and out of higher education. I did so myself. We often will work, Luke, you talked about your resume, lab manager, instructional designer, director of a thing, grants person. You've worn many, many hats yourself. So understanding that career planning is more personal than set for you. And then the half a thing, I owe my co-author Kevin Kelly a shout here. He wrote a book by Robert Wapnick in 2017 called How to Be Everything. And Wapnick has a term called multi-potentialites, which is his big 10-cent word for people who just aren't sure to do with the rest of their lives, right? Multi-potentialites are known for pursuing lots of different kinds of professional areas, switching careers several times throughout our lives, and juggling lots of projects at once. If that sounds like you, and if that sounds like rewarding work, welcome to being a multi-potentialite. The key to that is if you take everything I've done in my career, for example, it's a mess. I've done 17 different things in lots of different ways and places, and I've said yes to a lot of things like pursuing that Fulbright and being a sysadmin, an instructional designer, a librarian for a hot minute, an administrator, a theorist, an author, all those kinds of things. So having some kind of narrative that ties that all together is the key. What would you say to somebody who doesn't know your field at all? Listeners, does your mother actually know what you do for work? No. Your mother tells people, oh yes, my son is a teacher and he teaches people how to teach, right? And that's what my mom says about me. She's close. She's not exactly on the ball. How do I explain it to my mom? How do I explain it to people outside my field? If you have that narrative that ties together all of those interests that you've got, that's one way to start.
Oh, fantastic. My parents always said, make courses. My dad's much more well-versed in academia. My mom is not as much. And he's like, oh, Luke makes courses. And I was like, well, you're not wrong, but like there's more to it, but you're not inside, like you're close. It's just like,
and most of the people you'll talk to for alt-act jobs are more like Luke's mom,
right,
than like your dissertation advisor. So that's something to think about.
Exactly. But I love going back to your point, Tom, talking about that inventory type of a skill set and thinking about that too, because one of the things that I tell for a lot of folks who are trying to become instructional designers specifically nowadays is I think about think about backward design. We start first with our goals and then we work our way backwards. So if you wanted to be able to look at a current job posting as far as for your dream job of where do you want to work? So if Google was hiring for an instructional designer, read that job posting, see what they're looking for in a candidate, and then think about yourself, do some reflection. And then I guarantee you're going to recognize you're like, oh, I do have these skills. And like what you were just saying, like, yes, their terminology is different. They might say X, I really mean Y, but really it's still there. And then it becomes massaging that type of information to make sure that it's accurately conveying what it is that you really do. Exactly. And then there you go. And then you're on that path. Yeah. So speaking about all of that, there are definitely certain types of roles that do align for folks more with our type of an academic background compared to others. And especially with the explosion of jobs because of the pandemic and having all of these different forms of teachers, instructors. And I mean, even I've talked to plenty of professors as well, too, who said it's been a great ride. Time for my new calling. I'm like, okay, understand. We all go through those things. Are there certain positions that you can think of off the top of your head as far as for what do align well with someone with a type of an instructor, professor, teacher type of a background?
I might take that question and turn it sideways a little bit.
Okay.
When we were doing the research for the book, what we wanted to do was visualize the alternative academic space. And rather than parsing that out by role, it made more sense for us to divide that out by career stage. My co-author, Kevin Kelly, created a lovely chart. And for those of you watching the video, I'm holding it up here on a piece of paper. And for those of you listening to the podcast on audio, come back to the show notes and Luke will have a copy of this and we'll share that with everybody. But that chart, if you imagine the vertical axis, in the middle is alternative academic, at the very top is academic, and at the bottom is non-academic altogether. So moving away from academia as you come down. And then as you move from left to right, it's career phase. So if you're preparing for your career, if you're an early career person, in the middle of your career, late career, or you're one of our legacy folks who's looking to do something different after a long while in your conversations with people. That chart ended up being a really fantastic way to think about, okay, if you want to work at a higher education institution, you're probably closer to the top of the chart, academic to alt-ac. And if you want to work outside the academy, you're probably closer to the bottom of the chart, so alt-ac to non-academic. And then when we think about our early career things, all the way up at the top, at the academic side, right? This is the traditional stuff: graduate teaching assistant, assistant professor, associate professor, full professor. Then as we move down toward alternative academic, you get into things like adjunct teaching, not as your primary way of earning money, but as part of a portfolio of alternative academic things. For example, even with all the speaking and consulting that I do, I still like to have my hand in a classroom teaching credit-bearing courses, because it helps me to understand where today's graduate students are coming from and gives me a pipeline into connections where I hear new voices and new ideas coming in. But also things like embedded consulting, speaking, becoming an author, becoming an independent consultant, or being a unit director of a campus service unit that isn't necessarily something you've directly trained for. Colleges and universities have all kinds of service units where, if you have good people skills, if you are an organized person, if you know how to keep records and data, and if you know how to think about predicting and planning, then you're in good shape. I'm actually going to slide over here and take something down off my bookshelf. This is something that I keep near to me, like I can reach this while I'm talking with folks. And it's the Project Management Institute cheat sheet study sheet for the project management process. I spent a week cramming this and a whole bunch of formulas to get my project management professional certification, and that has stood me in good stead for most of my career. Knowing how to work with stakeholders, plan things out, communicate well about the work that you do, those are all transferable skills that, regardless of whether you've been a teacher, you've been an instructional designer for a long time, start looking at the various institutes and units and support areas at your institution or at institutions nearby. And then the bottom of that chart, where we're talking about non-academic stuff, where you look at membership and professional associations. Do they need people who have those skills that you've got? Scholarly publishing, working with an academic press, and keeping an ear in. So at West Virginia University Press, that published one of my books, Derek Krisoff is their editor, and his career started out that he was a teaching instructor. He went into scholarly publishing because it allowed him to still work with academics and be a complete book nerd, and that was one of his big passion areas. So he was able to combine those two kinds of things. So there's a lot of different ways that folks who are in teaching roles now or in other kinds of roles can focus in a little bit when you think about, well, what stage of your career are you in and where do you want to land? Do you want to land more toward the traditional academic stuff or way outside of it?
That's interesting. I'm trying to think too about from an instructional design perspective, because surprisingly, even though this is an instructional design podcast, I have talked to plenty of instructional designers who, same thing, like the professor who told me they've been doing this for 30 years. It's time to move on. And then same thing with some designers. They've done it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And they're like, okay, what's my next thing? And it seems like all the things you said certainly do apply to that as well.
Well, and two, if we think about, do I want to do the same thing that I know how to do, or am I looking for something a little fresh, a little change, a little different? It's no shame on anybody if you get a little in a rut about the work that you do, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. I know that if I am designing learning management system courses with faculty members for 20 years, it's going to get a little stale because they come with the same thing all the time. We don't understand how to do this, and we have to tell them about backward design, and we have to mention that we have to follow the WCAG standards and all that kind of stuff over and over and over again. So having something different or new, that can be a sideline for you, or it might turn into your primary work. So if you're looking to do the same kinds of things, look at learning and development units in industry rather than in academia. If you want to do something different, look at the learning management system companies. You've been using the LMS as an academic instructional designer for years. They have learning and development people at the LMS companies, and they want those people to tell others how to do with their products, or they want them to design new functions for the products. Every time you put in a wish list ticket for your learning management system, somebody's on the other end of that going, yeah, this is a good idea, we should explore that. And same thing like with video game industry design or publishing, like we've talked about earlier. And I want to unsay two very specific things here. Note that I do not say go knock on a library door or a museum door. You'll hear a lot of people advocating for those as alternatives. It's like, oh yeah, if you get bored with or burnt out on what you're doing, just become a librarian or go be a museum person. Let me tell you, as somebody with an information science degree, libraries and museums are specialized places where the credentials matter. If you want to go back and get a 2-year library degree and go be a librarian, awesome. But it's not, you've heard some people say, oh yeah, it's kind of a fallback position. You can go be a librarian, it's easy. No, that is a profession. So part of it is recognizing where do your skills actually fit in a way that you could slot in very easily rather than having to reprofessionalize.
Makes sense. Speaking of skills, writing dissertations, that's hard. That's quite a skill in and of itself. Whatever methodology you choose, it is going to be a difficult path. And this was something that I found very interesting about the book, and I'd love for you to be able to summarize it for us to talk more about it, is that inside of the book, there is actually a section that says making good use of a dissertation after graduation, which I love the name of that because for many people I've talked to within the academic world, is that for some folks, they have the mindset of once it's done, it's done. I'm never doing this again. That is just, it's just like, but wait a second, like you learned about so many things within research and with interviewing, with reading data, interpreting things. Like there's a lot of different things we could talk about here. And some people are like, meh, it's really done. So this is certainly a struggle as far as trying to be able to figure out what do I actually do with this, especially within the higher education world and corporate as well and everything else too. And one example that I think about when I was thinking about from the book as well too is that I did for my dissertation, it was an explanatory sequential mixed methods approach. Fun, nerdy type of an approach there. But I actually used this type of a research methodology and I applied that into how we evaluate our online courses over at MIT X Pro. It became the model with the help of my colleagues. That's what we based it around. So that's one example about how you can take what you've done for your research and apply it into your work. But I would love to hear more about from you, from some other different types of examples about how someone can apply their dissertation efforts into a type of a real world scenario.
Oh, fantastic. And I want to give my co-author, Kevin Kelly, the credit here. He was the primary writer for that chapter. So I'm grateful to him to be able to summarize the advice that we all share there. And to non-specialist audiences, basically everybody outside your dissertation committee, your dissertation can become evidence of skills and competencies. And you listed off a bunch, so you've already done that kind of thinking. A good way to start is identify some key words that would help your people find your stuff if they were searching for it and they knew how to find it. So what are key words from your discipline and your subdiscipline? Like if you're in astrobiology or cultural studies or TESOL or sociology. What are key words that deal with the research methodology that you use? You talked about mixed method and qualitative. So focus groups, surveys, I use gas chromatography, I do applied research, I do sentiment analysis of text messages, whatever that is. But also talk about your data analysis techniques. Are you doing regression, analysis of variance, the ANOVA technique? Are you doing topic modeling? What are those keywords that describe how you're doing the analysis? What is the topic for your research itself? What's your research population? Were you working with K-12 people, higher education folks, people in industry? And what are aspects of your work that are trending or perpetually popular, right? So data analytics, or I'm working with stem cells, or I analyze social media, or I'm a change agent or organizational change, or I work in robotics or cancer research or renewable energy. What are the big buzzwordy topics? And if you take all of those pieces together, your discipline, your research methodology, the analysis, the research topic, who you're working with, and what are those big things that lay people would understand. Then when you have those keywords together, you can start writing paragraphs of how to share your ideas in shorter, simpler forms. Those can take the forms of journal articles, conference presentations. Yeah, those are the things we all start with. But also blogs and listservs and social media posts, each with one shining idea in it, or a podcast episode, kind of like what we're doing now. And finally, ask what you want that dissertation research to do for you. What are the core ideas that you want to share, and what format makes the most sense for that? How much time do you have to convert your dissertation into public-facing things? What do you want to reach in terms of the ideas and the audience? Would that audience understand the dissertation as it's written? Usually not. And how could you convey your ideas without using specialized language? And that's a skill, and it takes practice. What are your goals beyond just publishing your work in another format? Do you want to increase your exposure to a certain audience? Do you want people to use your stuff in a practical way? And are there career or job ideas already in your work? Is there a job that you would like to do, but that job doesn't really exist yet? Could you go to a company or a college or university and say, you really need somebody to do marketing, data analytics, segmentation. And you don't have somebody yet, but that's what I did my dissertation on, and boy, could I help you. That kind of stuff, it comes out of that skill inventory when you're thinking about your dissertation.
I love that. That approach is so fantastic too, because you're right. People certainly do need a lot of help in different types of areas. And until you actually start saying those types of words, where they're like, oh yeah, we don't have that department. Or like, oh yeah, we actually got rid of that 2 years ago, but we really need it back. So no, it all makes a lot of sense. Well, I like to pivot for a second, Tom, because going aside from the whole dissertation aspect, another huge thing that a lot of people inside of academia within our space talk about is with consulting. That always seems to be everyone saying that, well, once I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to go into consulting as well too. And it's like, okay, great. But do you know how to actually do that is always kind of like my next question. And I was fortunate enough, I had Christy Tucker. She came on the podcast a while ago talking about, well, how do you do freelance? Because that's another thing that everyone's always like, oh, I'm just going to do freelance. And I was like, yeah, but it actually takes quite a bit of effort and some thought here and trying to make sure the customer's happy and finding the clients and, going through all of those motions. So to me, consulting still has that type of a similarity where it's not like I can just say, hey, I'm now a consultant. Like it doesn't work like that. So in your opinion, from what you wrote about, can you describe for us about how one actually does get into consulting and how to really make this an effective type of a practice?
Yeah, that was one of my chapters, because I was the person who got out there and did the side hustle, and that side hustle became my main hustle for a while as well. And then I came back into higher education. I'm one of those big chickens who likes to have health insurance and a steady paycheck. At the same time, we are in a culture now where almost everybody is expected to have some kind of second line of what we do. And even if we go back even 10 or 15 years, that expectation wasn't there. So when we think about having a side hustle or a second piece or doing consulting, either as what we do for a living or as a nice little addition to the full-time job that we've got, you talk about your own personal brand. And these are things that we don't talk about in academia, right? So how much should you charge for giving a talk, doing a workshop? No one will tell you.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a boundary that I had to really get over when we're thinking about personal branding, right? So for what am I doing this work? Where would I want to do it? How do I want to be known? What is the quick story about me that I want people to remember? Starting out, though, with consulting is starting to build an audience in another way. So avenues for publication, avenues for communication. So writing blogs, doing podcasts like this one, doing an opinion piece and getting it published in the Chronicle of Higher Education or The Conversation or The Evolution or those kinds of spaces where lots of higher education readers will be looking. The other part of it is myth busting, right? So self-promotion is unscholarly. We should be volunteering our efforts. Yeah, if you have a tenure-line job and you're being paid to have that extra bandwidth to give back to the service. if you don't have someone paying you and then part of your job is giving back to the profession, guess what? That's a volunteer effort. And the challenge for me was, okay, well, is it okay if I say I'm pretty good and you should work with me? And the answer is yes there. Another myth that we have to bust. No one will want to hear from me. I'm just starting out. It's the newer voices in our field who are asking questions that the rest of us thought were settled a long time ago, or they're asking questions that we didn't even think to ask. So when you're thinking about how you want to pitch yourself to other folks with consulting, is there a problem or a question that nobody has figured out yet? Is there something where you can help people even get one more step toward, yeah, we understand that? That's a value that you bring. There's another myth to bust here, which is someday I will get noticed if I just work hard and persevere. What that means is you will put in an awful lot of effort and no one will pay you any attention at all, right? Now, every once in a while, people get quote unquote discovered, right? Some long-serving person in the field goes, hey, that younger person is doing really good work, or this person, who's been in another field for a long time and just came in is fantastic, and you all should look at that person. That almost never happens. So the challenge there is you have to create moments where you are visible, where you are out there in front of other people. And then you have to tell people that it's okay to continue the conversation. You can give the best conference presentation you've ever given in your life, and people will leave it and go, oh, I'm really thinking about that, and this person really helped me to understand a new thing. That's awesome. And no one will reach out to you. The other part of that is like, I'll charge less, or I'll do it for free just to get the exposure. Value your work. So at the end of conference presentations, when I was first starting out in my career, my last slide was a smiling picture of me with the one book that I had published, and it had my website, thomasjtobin.com, on there. And I would give a one-sentence non-commercial at the end of the presentation. And I would say, thank you very much for being here with me today. I hope you got some good ideas out of this. I speak and consult on this issue and a bunch of other ones. If you'd like to continue the conversation, here's how to get in touch with me. Thanks again for coming. And then I turn that slide off and I go to the last slide. I always check with the conference organizers first to see if that's frowned upon. And if they don't want me to do it, I don't do it. But if it's okay to say, hey, by the way, if you'd like to continue the conversation, get in touch with me. That's how people know. The last piece about that is marketing yourself, right? So you do have to do a little self-marketing. You have to put a rate sheet together. You have to put a website together for people to see. And in the book, we talk about how do you set your rates? The question that no one will tell you about, we tell you about in the book. And, how do people know you're an expert? I hate to say it this simply, but you tell them you're an expert. And then, of course, you have the chops to back it up. It is, though, that simple. Give people ways to understand the signal, right? It's not just, ooh, that was really great. I wonder if they consult. But, ooh, that was really great. And they said at the end that they consult, so I'm going to get in touch with them. So that's one way to start is think about your personal brand. Think about avenues for publication and communication and getting yourself out there. And then actually say, by the way, I do this, and see what comes in.
Oh, fantastic. Love it, Tom. Thank you for sharing all those things. Wonderful, amazing moments. And the folks at home, I hope you were taking notes, because we've talked about on the show at length about building your brand, finding your voice. But I also love, too, the whole myth busting segment because it's so true, where people do talk about how it's just like, just do it for free. It's fine. And it's just like, eventually you keep on getting these free gigs, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm working 40 hours a week for free, and I don't know what's coming next. Like, you're trying to...
The opposite is actually true. When I raised my rates, I got more business because people thought, oh, that person must be worth the more money.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's that value, because you are now saying, no, I am credible. No, I am valuable. My time is valuable, but you will get a whole bunch out of it because what I'm actually bringing to the table. And it just is so true.
Exactly.
No, so absolutely true with everything you just said. So fantastic. I love that. Well, Tom, there's one more thing I have for you, and then I will get you out of here. And thank you for your time.
Yeah.
But the last thing I wanted to ask about, building off of building a brand, is that we also did talk about going as far as for building out a portfolio, which to me goes hand in hand for sure, because it's an overwhelming type of an overarching thing. But in the book, one thing that caught my eye immediately was that within the chapter of the book talking about the portfolio, it says talking about building it over time and with intentionality. That is different. I have never heard it phrased like that way before, which I thought was super interesting. Can you describe for us the significance of why those words were included within building the portfolio?
Glad to do it, and I'm actually glad we talked about one of the chapters that Kevin wrote, one that I wrote, and this one, Katie Linder was the primary writer for that chapter, so I'll summarize her advice here a little bit. She talks about building a habit of documentation, and what that means is keeping a master list of your professional accomplishments, your training, your credentialing, your skill building, your presentations, publications, projects, other milestones, along with a record of the dates when those occurred. And once you have that master list, other and maybe more creative forms of documentation you can generate from those. And every time you do your annual review, you go like, oh, what projects did I work on this year? And I got to go back and look at my emails and all that kind of stuff. So it helps you with your day job as well as with possibly going into an alternative academic career to just get in the habit of once a week saying, what am I working on? And throwing that information into a chronological list. Maybe you categorize them like classes taught, publications, conference presentations, professional roles, work products, projects, your educational records, grants received, lots of different things. But you don't have to necessarily categorize absolutely everything. If you identify the things that you need to be documenting, though, it's kind of a starting point. There's a lot of different ways to document it. For example, Katie talks about she was a frequent podcaster, and each of the podcasts has a website with an episode guide, and that was a way to document her work over time. She links to her podcast websites on her curriculum vitae for anybody who's interested in learning more about those projects. And then once you know those kinds of categories, you can start to schedule in updates in your calendar. And, monthly check-ins to add professional accomplishments, milestones to a master's CV or resume, and you're not losing a record of those areas of your professional life as you're completing them. Now, that gets big really quickly, right? It's easier than you might think to lose track of it because you do a lot of things. And so another form of documentation is just journaling or blogging or a private or maybe public reflection on your professional work. Whether you write them down, do an audio recording, do a video diary, those can document, for synthesis for later time. And it forces you to think about, well, what are the themes? What's the through line? How do I talk about the values that I embody in my work? What am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to? And talking about that maybe every 6 months or a year allows you to say, okay, I've got this master list of a bazillion things in it. And here's my quick diary about how I perceive the path that I'm taking. And having that website as a central hub for documentation, you put your curriculum vitae, your e-portfolio, your publications, presentations, grant overviews, archives, those kinds of things. So to wrap up for our conversation for today, Luke, the ALTAC space has many different types of work under that umbrella. The wide open nature of that career path, it can be kind of scary or it can be liberating. I mean, my co-author, Kevin Kelly, he went 100% independent, and he works with colleges and universities on their inclusion efforts. My other co-author, Katie Linder, she parlayed her ALTAC work into director positions, dean positions. She's now an associate vice chancellor at UC Denver. And I myself, I've got both a full-time job with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I've got a rewarding personal consulting career where I get to work with colleagues around the world to lower barriers to learning. So all of us started by finding a big issue, a challenge, a problem, or a gap that we just had to address. Then we found the people who were also passionate about those ideas, and we started to create our networks from there. And that's probably a good place to come full circle for this conversation too. Wherever you are in your career journey, know that there are people around you and they are your first and your best resource. Kind of like we're doing with this podcast itself.
Absolutely. Awesome. Tom, fantastic. Fantastic. Love it. Love the summary about everything. Really cool. We came full circle. Was not planned, so that's awesome. I'm glad you did that. Well, Tom, the very last question I want to be able to ask you is, where can people go to learn more about you, your work, your books, plural? Feel free to plug away.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I hope listeners will find our Stylus Press book, Going Alt-Ac, either through the link in this episode's show notes or at their nearest library. And as for me individually, I'm still on Twitter at Thomas J. Tobin. And for people who'd like to connect with me or learn more about my advocacy and work, you can visit thomasjtobin.com, and we'll have a link in the show notes there too. Listeners, I hope that our conversation today has helped you to think more deeply about alternative academic careers, and I'd love to hear from you when you have questions, ideas to bring, successes to share. So, Luke, thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast. It's been a real pleasure talking with you and exploring alt-ac careers today.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you so much. Thank you again. Well, thanks again, Tom. And we will definitely be in touch with you folks at home. Definitely go down into the show notes. As Tom already said it, I will be including that because he's a professional. So he knows that a podcast host should link these things. So all the things that Tom talked about today with the book and everything else too from the resources from the show, I'll include down below. But Tom, once again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Take care, everybody.
Tom, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you are watching this interview, and for all of those learning nerds out there, be sure to follow Tom. Like I said, LinkedIn, Twitter. He's extremely active on social media. All of his posts are extremely insightful and valuable, so be sure to do that. Obviously, pick up your copy of the book for everything that we talked about on today's show. It's really, really going to help you out if you are thinking about your next moves in your career, identifying your skill sets, thinking about everything else. Definitely be sure to pick up that one. And then the very last thing I wanted to be able to say, folks, is that once again, if you are looking to be able to learn more about how to focus on the professional development skills within instructional design, you want to take your skills to the next level, be sure to apply to Instructional Design Institute. I would love to be able to work with you and to help you to get you to where you want to be able to go. As always, if you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me either via email, my website, LinkedIn, whatever. I'm everywhere on social media and the internet nowadays. There is some way for you to be able to find me. Hope you like this episode. Be a friend, tell a friend, share it with somebody who you know is going through all these things and they can help them out. But hey folks, that's all I have for you today. So of course, have to say the very last thing of stay nerdy out there. I'll talk to you next time.